It began on a quiet night in the desert, the kind of night where even the stars seemed to whisper secrets. Inside a small observatory surrounded by endless sand, a few scientists were finishing their long shift. It was almost morning, and the only sound was the soft hum of the computers and the wind brushing against the windows. Then suddenly, one of the machines started blinking in a strange rhythm. At first they thought it was just another satellite passing by or some random interference. But as they watched the data repeat again and again, they realized this was no ordinary noise. It was a pattern. A clear, repeating sequence that could not have come from nature. For a long moment, no one spoke. They just stared at the screens, their tired eyes wide awake now. One of them ran the numbers again, checking the coordinates, checking for errors. But there were none. The signal came from deep space, and far beyond any human satellite, far beyond anything known. They recorded it, analyzed it, and tried to dismiss it as some kind of coincidence. But the signal kept coming every few hours in perfect intervals. And every time it played, it was slightly different, as if it was responding to something unseen. When the team reported it to their higher authorities, they were told to keep it secret until further review. But secrets are hard to keep, especially in a world that lives online. Within a few days, the rumors spread. People on social media began sharing strange posts about a message from the stars. News outlets picked up the story. Everyone wanted to know what was really out there. Governments around the world tried to calm the public, saying it was just a scientific anomaly. But deep down, many people could feel it. Something had changed. It wasn't just about science anymore. It was about existence. Across the world, people began staying up at night staring at the sky. There was a strange feeling in the air, like humanity had just taken a step into a new world. A world that might be far bigger and more mysterious than anyone ever imagined. The excitement turned into obsession. Some believed it was proof that intelligent life existed elsewhere. Others feared it was a sign of danger. There were arguments, debates, even small protests. People prayed, scientists argued, and children asked questions that no one could answer. For a brief time, humanity was united, not by war, not by politics, but by curiosity. Everyone, no matter where they lived, felt connected by the same question. Who sent that signal? Days turned into weeks. Then one night, something happened that no one was prepared for. Satellites orbiting Earth detected a massive object moving into the solar system. It was enormous, too large to be a natural asteroid. It was slow, controlled, and heading directly toward Earth. At first, governments denied it. But when amateur astronomers confirmed it through their telescopes, the truth could no longer be hidden. Something was coming. The object didn't move like a meteor. It slowed down as it reached Earth's orbit, as if deciding where to stop. Then, without warning, it came to a halt, suspended high above the planet. It didn't make a sound. It didn't send a message. It just stayed there like an eye watching silently from the sky. People across the world stopped what they were doing and looked up. Television channels broadcasted live footage of the mysterious shape, dark, metallic, and massive enough to cast a faint shadow on the clouds below. For days it remained motionless, and the world held its breath. Every government on Earth tried to communicate with it. Scientists sent coded light signals, mathematical messages, and radio pulses in hundreds of languages. But there was no answer. The object neither moved nor responded. Some people believed it was peaceful, a kind of observation craft here only to study humanity. Others thought it was a warning or a threat. Fear began to grow, streets filled with protests. People stocked up on food and supplies. The global economy shook as uncertainty spread like a wave. Then, one evening, after nearly 2 weeks of silence, the object changed. Its surface began to shimmer faintly, glowing in patterns similar to the first signal detected from space. Cameras across the world captured the moment as bright lines of light danced across its metallic surface. Then, without any sound or explosion, it vanished, simply faded away, disappearing from every radar and telescope. Just like that, it was gone. The world was left confused and afraid. Some said it had retreated. Others believed it had cloaked itself, hiding somewhere above Earth. Scientists tried to find traces, but there were none. It was as if it had never been there. In the days that followed, tension filled the air. News anchors spoke in nervous tones. People went to work, but their minds stayed somewhere up in the sky. Everyone had the same uneasy thought. What if it comes back? In that silence, something inside humanity shifted. For centuries, humans had looked up at the stars wondering if they were alone. Now that question had been answered, and the answer was far more unsettling than anyone imagined. But beneath the fear, something else began to grow. Determination. Scientists refused to stop their research. Observatories across the world collaborated like never before. Data was shared openly, and new global alliances were formed to study what had happened. For the first time in history, humanity had a common goal: to understand who or what bar had visited them. Months passed, and life slowly tried to return to normal. But nothing truly felt normal anymore. Even on quiet nights, people found themselves looking up at the stars longer than usual, waiting, wondering if something was watching back. Then, strange reports began to appear again. Small satellites detected faint energy readings from the far side of the moon. It wasn't strong enough to be seen, but it was consistent. The same pattern, the same rhythm, the same signal. Once again, the world's scientists turned their eyes to the heavens. The pattern was faint, but there was no doubt. It was identical to the original signal that had started everything. Some scientists believed it was a message. Others said it was just an echo from the first contact. But when a group of engineers managed to decode a fragment of the pattern, what they found sent chills down every spine in the room. It wasn't just a signal, it was coordinates pointing to a location not on Earth, but within the solar system, on Mars. Suddenly, everything made sense. The signal had not just been a message, it was a map. And if it was a map, that meant there was something waiting to be found. The discovery reached the world's leaders, and they decided to keep it confidential. But again, leaks spread. Soon people around the world began talking about Mars, the red planet that might now hold the key to humanity's biggest mystery. Plans began in secret. Nations started collaborating, pooling their resources to send an advanced mission to Mars. It was to be the first of its kind, not just for research, but for contact. While the details remained hidden, rumors spread fast. People whispered that humanity was no longer waiting for the aliens to return. They were going to find them first. In small towns, people gathered in groups discussing what might come next. Some were excited, dreaming of what humanity could learn. Others were afraid, worried that disturbing whatever was on Mars could bring disaster. But no one could deny it anymore. The world had changed forever. From that single signal in the desert to the silent visitor above Earth, humanity had crossed a line it could never go back from. The universe had noticed them. And somewhere far away, perhaps light years across the stars, something or someone was watching. They might have been silent, they might have disappeared, but their message had already been delivered. As the Mars mission quietly began its final preparations, humanity stood at the edge of a new era, one filled with fear, hope, and the unknown. Every satellite in orbit kept its sensors wide open. Every observatory stayed awake. Every person who looked up at the night sky wondered the same thing. Was this the beginning of peace or the beginning of something much darker? And as the first rocket engines prepared to fire, no one noticed the faint, distant glimmer in the sky. Far away in the cold silence of space, several tiny points of light were moving, slowly, deliberately, and toward Earth. The world didn't know it yet, but the first chapter of the greatest story in human history had just begun. The world had changed, but no one could explain how or why. Ever since that mysterious object appeared and vanished above Earth, people had stopped thinking of space as something distant. It no longer felt like a cold, faraway mystery. It felt close now, almost alive, like something out there was quietly watching back. Months had passed since the silent visitor, as people began to call it, disappeared. Governments refused to share what they knew, but small pieces of truth always found a way to leak out. Every few weeks, someone would claim to have found new readings, new data, or new light patterns in the sky. Most were proven false, but a few made even the most skeptical scientists pause in wonder. In a small command center somewhere in Europe, a group of engineers was tracking the same faint signal pattern that had once caused global panic. But this time it wasn't coming from deep space. It was coming from inside the solar system. They analyzed it again, and soon the coordinates became clear. The source of the signal was Mars. When this information reached higher authorities, it caused both excitement and fear. Mars had always fascinated humanity, but this was different. The coordinates didn't lead to a mountain, crater, or valley. They led to a flat, empty plain near the edge of an old canyon where no known geological formations existed. There was only rock and dust. A quiet decision was made. A special mission would be sent to investigate. It would not be made public until they found something worth announcing. The mission was codenamed Project Horizon. The preparation took months. Astronauts were selected, equipment was upgraded, and a new kind of rover was built. One designed not just for exploration, but for deep scanning. The world, unaware of these secret plans, went on with its daily struggles while behind closed doors, humanity was preparing for a journey that could change history again. Then, one early morning, without any public broadcast or media coverage, a spacecraft launched into the sky. It disappeared into the clouds, leaving behind only a thin trail of fire and silence. The mission had begun. During the long journey to Mars, the crew stayed busy running tests and reviewing data. But deep down, each of them felt the same mix of wonder and unease. What if they really found something? What if the signal wasn't a coincidence? What if they weren't alone after all? When the spacecraft finally entered Mars's orbit, the crew held their breath. Below them stretched a vast, endless desert of red dust, mountains, and canyons carved by time. The place was hauntingly quiet, but beautiful in its loneliness. They guided the rover toward the coordinates, watching through screens as it rolled across the rough surface. At first, everything seemed normal, just rocks, sand, and shadows. But then, as the rover reached the marked location, something strange appeared on the monitor. The ground didn't look natural anymore. There were shapes, sharp, straight lines buried under layers of dust. The rover's scanners picked up materials not native to Mars, metallic compounds arranged in geometric patterns. It was as if something artificial had been buried there for centuries. Excitement filled the air. The scientists couldn't believe what they were seeing. They zoomed in closer, clearing dust away using small robotic arms. Beneath the reddish soil, smooth metal began to appear, dull silver in color, almost like the hull of a spacecraft. The rover continued digging, and soon a strange marking became visible. A circular emblem carved into the metal, repeating the same pattern from the first alien signal Earth had received. No one spoke for a while. The air inside the control room was still. Everyone knew what this meant. The signal had not come from deep space by accident. It had come from this, whatever was buried beneath Mars. The news was reported quietly to Earth. Only a few world leaders were informed at first, but as more data came in, it became impossible to keep secret. The rover's footage was too extraordinary. Someone leaked a few images online, and within hours, the entire world was watching again. Every screen, every news channel, every social media feed showed the same image. The strange metal structure under the red soil, shining faintly under the weak Martian sunlight. People were stunned. Some called it the greatest discovery in human history. Others warned it was a trap. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Many believed the object under the surface was a dormant alien ship. Others thought it was a monument, maybe a message left by a long-extinct civilization. Within days, protests and celebrations erupted across cities. Some people carried signs saying, "We are not alone." Others demanded that the mission be stopped immediately, fearing that disturbing whatever was on Mars might provoke a disaster. But no one could stop what was already in motion. Humanity had come too far to turn back now. The scientists continued to explore remotely, sending deeper scans into the buried structure. The readings grew stranger with every layer. The metal was not corroded or damaged. It was as if it had been protected from time itself. Beneath the surface there appeared to be chambers, tunnels, and even something that resembled machinery. Then one night, something unexpected happened. While the rover was scanning one of the buried walls, the structure emitted a faint pulse of light. It was weak, almost invisible at first, but it repeated 3 times, the exact same rhythm as the original signal received on Earth. The control room erupted in shock. The pulse wasn't random. It was intentional. Something beneath the Martian surface had responded. Engineers quickly ran diagnostics, thinking it was a sensor glitch. But the readings were real. The pulse came from deep inside the buried structure. It wasn't just an ancient ruin. It was still active. Back on Earth, people watched the news with disbelief. It seemed like the impossible was happening right before their eyes. The object on Mars was alive, or at least part of it was. Over the next few weeks, new missions were prepared. Humanity was now united by both curiosity and fear. Scientists argued over what to do next. Some wanted to dig deeper and find out what was inside. Others warned that disturbing it might trigger something unpredictable. Still, humanity has always been drawn to the unknown. Exploration is in its nature. Despite the warnings, the mission continued. The rover's drills began breaking through one of the metallic walls. Dust and gas spilled out into the thin Martian air. And then, as the wall cracked open, the cameras caught a glimpse inside. A vast hollow space filled with strange crystal-like structures and what appeared to be seats or control panels. It looked like the inside of a spacecraft frozen in time. But what truly shocked everyone were the objects resting inside. Small figures, not human but humanoid, lying motionless as if they had been there for countless centuries. The moment was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Humanity had found proof of intelligent life, not in the stars, but right in its neighboring planet. The images were soon broadcasted around the world, and billions of people watched in silence. There was no longer any doubt. The signal that had once been dismissed as a random anomaly was real. The silent visitor that appeared above Earth had come searching for something. Maybe these remains, maybe answers. And now, humanity had found what they were looking for. But with discovery came fear. What if these beings were not the last of their kind? What if others were still out there? And they now knew that humans had disturbed their resting place. World leaders held secret meetings. Space defense programs that had once been theoretical suddenly became urgent. The idea of protection beyond Earth became a serious topic. Humanity's curiosity had turned into caution. Meanwhile, scientists studying the alien structures discovered something chilling. The markings inside the ship were not just symbols. They were warnings. The same repeated pattern appeared again and again, like a message left behind. When translated using mathematical algorithms, it roughly meant one thing: they are coming. No one knew who they were. That night, as telescopes across the world turned their lenses toward the stars, faint new lights appeared on the outer edge of the solar system, small but moving in formation. Humanity didn't know it yet, but the first chapter of peace was over. Something had been awakened, and it was now watching from the dark, and far beyond Mars. In the cold silence between worlds, unseen eyes blinked open, eyes that had once looked upon Earth not with curiosity but with fear. After the discovery on Mars, the world could no longer look at the sky the same way. The once quiet red planet, which had always been seen as just another barren world, now carried secrets older than anyone could imagine. The images of the buried ship and the strange figures inside had spread everywhere. People stared at them in disbelief, wondering what kind of beings they were and why they had been sleeping under the dust for so long. Governments held urgent meetings. Every scientist, politician, and expert had the same question: how long had they been there? And more importantly, had something or someone put them there? The more scientists studied the Martian ship, the more strange things they discovered. The materials it was made from didn't match anything found on Earth or even Mars. It wasn't stone or metal as humans understood it. It was something in between, lightweight yet stronger than anything humanity had ever created. It seemed to react to light and temperature, almost like it was alive in some way. But the most shocking discovery came from the markings engraved inside the ship. They weren't random symbols. They were patterns, carefully repeated, mathematical, and organized. When translated through computer models, they revealed a series of coordinates. Some pointed to places within the solar system. Others led far beyond. No one knew what they meant. Some believed they were warnings, while others thought they were routes, perhaps a map to other civilizations or lost colonies. Whatever the truth was, it proved one thing: the beings who had built this ship were explorers too, just like humans. The news created a storm on Earth. People wanted answers. Religious groups claimed it was proof of creation beyond human understanding. Scientists said it was evolution on a cosmic scale. Conspiracy theorists insisted that governments had known about extraterrestrial life for decades and were finally forced to admit it. In the middle of all this noise, a quiet fear began to grow. If these beings had existed once, and if the words "they are coming" truly meant what they seemed to, then something or someone out there knew about humanity now. For centuries, humans had looked to the stars in wonder. Now they looked up with unease. The universe didn't feel empty anymore. It felt crowded. In hidden laboratories and underground bases, scientists worked day and night to decode the rest of the markings. Each time they found a new pattern, it only led to more confusion. The design spoke of energy forms, structures, and technology far beyond human understanding. Some scientists began to worry that the ship on Mars wasn't just a crash. It was a warning left behind by another civilization that had once faced destruction. The discovery changed the balance of power on Earth. Nations that had once competed now found themselves forced to cooperate. No one wanted to face an unknown threat alone. What had started as a race for technology turned into a global partnership. The United Earth Council was formed, a group made up of leaders, scientists, and strategists from every corner of the planet. Their first mission was simple: to prepare for whatever might come. Massive projects began almost immediately. New satellites were launched to monitor deep space. Giant telescopes were built in remote mountains and deserts. Every country with even a small space program joined the mission to watch the skies. But something strange happened along the way. The more humans tried to prepare for war, the more united they became. Old enemies began sharing technology. Scientists who once competed now worked side by side. Engineers from different nations collaborated to design the first true planetary defense system, something capable of tracking and responding to any potential object entering Earth's orbit. The media called it Project Aegis factories that had once built weapons for wars. Between nations now worked to build something for all humanity. For the first time in history, Earth wasn't divided by borders. People realized that whatever threat existed out there didn't care about race, religion, or politics. Humanity would survive only if it stood as one. But unity came with fear. The unknown can bring people together, but it can also keep them awake at night. People began questioning what kind of species would bury ships on other planets and send signals through space. What had destroyed them? Were they running from something? Or were they the danger themselves? Some people began seeing lights in the sky and reporting strange movements at night. Scientists called it imagination, but deep down everyone wondered if it was true. Maybe something really was out there, watching. As Project Aegis grew, a new generation of scientists and explorers emerged. They were young, hopeful, and unafraid. They had grown up hearing about the silent visitor and the Mars discovery. To them, this wasn't science fiction, it was their reality. They believed humanity's future wasn't on Earth alone, but among the stars. Still, the question remained: what if something found them first? Months later, while studying data from deep space observatories, a team noticed faint movements far beyond Pluto. Tiny specks of light moving in strange, curved paths, not like asteroids, not like comets. Their motion was deliberate, steady, and synchronized. At first, it was dismissed as an error, but as more observatories confirmed the same readings, fear crept into every meeting room and command center on Earth. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone thought it. Something was coming. The news was not shared with the public right away. Leaders wanted to avoid panic. Instead, Project Aegis accelerated. More satellites were launched. The first orbital defense stations were activated. In the shadows of progress, there was tension. Some believed the movements beyond Pluto were just natural phenomena. Others insisted they were ships, massive ones. But no one could prove anything. Meanwhile, strange transmissions began reaching Earth again. The signals were weak, distorted, almost like whispers carried through the dark. They came from different points in space, but the pattern was the same: repeating, rhythmic, and impossible to decode completely. One scientist compared them to distress calls. Another thought they were warnings. A few believed they were echoes, signals left behind from an ancient war between civilizations that no longer existed. Whatever the truth was, humanity knew one thing: they could no longer pretend the universe was silent. The world's focus shifted entirely toward the skies. Students studied astronomy more than ever. Space agencies received more funding than any time in history. Music, art, and literature began to reflect the same theme: humanity standing on the edge of something unknown. For the first time, people began to think of Earth as one home, not divided by borders but united under the same sky. But even as this sense of unity grew, a quiet fear followed. People wondered if this was how it always began, civilizations reaching for the stars, only to draw the attention of something that was better left undisturbed. In the middle of all this, one of the satellites orbiting Mars captured something extraordinary. Near the site where the ancient ship had been found, a new light appeared. It wasn't sunlight and it wasn't reflected. It was coming from beneath the ground, glowing faintly, pulsing at intervals. Scientists immediately tried to study it, but the data was limited. The only conclusion they could reach was that something beneath the surface of Mars had reactivated. No one knew how or why. The news reached the world leaders, and this time, there was no hesitation. The Council authorized a second manned mission to Mars, larger, stronger, and more equipped. This time, they were not just going to observe. They were going to dig deeper. When the mission was announced, people all over the world watched the broadcast. The images of astronauts preparing for launch filled screens everywhere. There was fear, yes, but there was also pride. Humanity was no longer running from the unknown. It was going to face it head-on. As the rocket lifted off, cheers echoed from every corner of the planet. People felt hope again. Hope that maybe this time, they would find answers. But somewhere far away, beyond the reach of any telescope, something was indeed watching. From the darkness of deep space, faint signals flickered back. Not random, not chaotic, but in perfect rhythm. The same pattern that humanity had once discovered in the desert years ago. It was as if the stars themselves were whispering back, answering a call that had been sent long before humanity was ready to hear it. And as the new spacecraft sped toward Mars, no one realized that this was not just a mission of discovery anymore. It was a step into something far larger, a story that had started long before humans even looked up at the sky and wondered if they were alone. The quiet red planet was waiting. The stars were moving, and humanity's journey into the unknown had only just begun. After the second mission to Mars was announced, the entire planet seemed to hold its breath. People from every country, every background waited with hope and fear. The memories of the first discovery were still fresh. The buried ship, the glowing markings, the warnings no one could fully understand. Now, with a new mission heading straight into that mystery, humanity felt like it was crossing a line that could never be undone. The spacecraft took off under a sky filled with cheers and prayers. Crowds gathered across cities, watching the bright light rise higher and higher, until it disappeared into the stars. For a brief moment, there was no division, no borders, no wars, no competition. Everyone looked up at the same sky, united by a single question: what will they find this time? The journey took months. On Earth, people followed every update. Schools showed live broadcasts. Families watched every new signal from Mars, and scientists worked around the clock to support the mission. But behind the scenes, something bigger was happening. The United Earth Council had grown in strength. What started as a loose partnership between nations had now become a global force. Every major country had joined hands under one purpose: to protect Earth and its people. For the first time, humanity was truly united. The Council's headquarters stood in a neutral zone, surrounded by desert and silence. Inside, teams of experts studied every piece of information from space, from the glowing lights on Mars to the strange moving dots beyond Pluto. They knew something was coming. Even if they couldn't yet prove it, a new project had begun, quietly but quickly. It was called Project Aegis, named after the ancient symbol of protection. The idea was simple but ambitious. Build a defense system that could guard Earth from anything approaching from the stars. Factories that once built cars and weapons now built satellites and scanners. Engineers designed machines capable of detecting the smallest movement in space. Students dreamed of becoming astronauts, scientists, or code breakers. The world had changed forever, and everyone wanted to be a part of it. Even the media changed its tone. News programs that once focused on politics and entertainment now discussed science, astronomy, and hope. There was fear, yes, but there was also pride. Humanity was finally working together, not against each other. The mission on Mars sent daily updates. The team landed near the site of the first discovery, a wide, flat valley filled with red dust and shadows. The glowing light beneath the surface was still faintly visible, pulsing like a heartbeat. The astronauts set up camp and began digging deeper. Back on Earth, the world waited. Every signal from Mars was analyzed instantly. People could barely sleep wondering what would be found next. And then, after weeks of silence, the message finally came. They had reached something. The cameras showed an underground chamber, vast and silent. Inside it were rows of strange objects. Not machines, not buildings, but something in between. The walls were covered in patterns that shimmered faintly under the light. Some looked like maps, others like stories told through symbols. It was clear now this was not just a crash site. It was a memory, a message left behind. As scientists began decoding the patterns, they realized something even more shocking. The markings didn't just describe technology or planets, they spoke of a war. A war that had once stretched across the stars, destroying countless civilizations. The beings buried on Mars hadn't been explorers or invaders. They were survivors. The discovery shook the Council. If what was written on those walls was true, then humanity might be standing at the edge of a war far older and greater than itself. The Council kept this information secret for a time. They didn't want panic, but eventually, pieces of the truth began to leak, as they always did. And once again, the world changed. People began to prepare, not just governments, but ordinary citizens too. Some started studying survival techniques while others built shelters. Yet most people found comfort in unity. They believed that if humanity could work together, they could face anything, even the unknown. Scientists and engineers began designing something completely new. Machines that could operate both in space and within Earth's atmosphere. They weren't built for war, but for protection. Around the world, large launch sites were established. These became centers of hope and pride. People volunteered to help in any way they could. Some built equipment, some cooked for the workers, and some simply stood nearby watching history being made. Soon, the first phase of Project Aegis was complete. A network of massive satellites surrounded the planet like a shining shield. They could detect any object entering Earth's orbit, no matter how small or fast. For the first time in history, humanity had built something that truly belonged to everyone. There were no flags, no national colors, only the symbol of a single planet working as one, and yet the sense of peace was fragile. The more people stared at the stars, the more they wondered if someone else was staring back. Then one night, it happened again. Telescopes in South America picked up faint lights at the edge of the solar system, the same ones that had been seen months earlier, only now they were brighter and moving closer. Within hours, observatories around the world confirmed it. Objects were entering the system from deep space. Their speed was unnatural, steady, controlled, deliberate. The news spread quickly. The Council tried to remain calm, but the data was clear. These weren't comets or asteroids. Whatever they were heading directly toward the inner planets. People across the world panicked. Markets crashed, communication lines overloaded, and millions stayed awake through the night, staring at the stars, wondering if this was the moment they had been fearing. But humanity didn't fall apart this time. It stood firm. Project Aegis moved into full operation. Defense systems were activated. Space stations were prepared as observation points. For the first time, Earth's orbit was filled with not just satellites but human-built ships, prototypes of the new era of space defense. These ships weren't made for attack. They were made to watch, to protect, and to understand. But deep down, everyone knew that if something hostile was coming, humanity would not stay silent again. Across the world, leaders appeared on screens, not to divide, but to reassure. They spoke of unity, courage, and the will to survive. People listened. They believed. The lights in the sky kept coming closer, but then they stopped. Just like the silent visitor years ago, they paused beyond Mars, hovering in the darkness. They didn't send messages. They didn't move further. They just watched. For days, they stayed there motionless. Scientists pointed telescopes at them, trying to study their shape. The images were blurry, but one detail stood out. They were massive, far larger than any human ship, with surfaces that glowed faintly like living metal. Speculation filled the world once again. Were these the same beings who had buried the ship on Mars? Or were they something else entirely? No one had answers. As the days passed, strange signals began reaching Earth again. Not words, not sounds, but low-frequency waves, the kind that made instruments buzz and lights flicker. Some thought it was communication. Others thought it was a warning. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights vanished. The world breathed again. People cheered, thinking the danger was over. But scientists knew better. They had been studying the signals carefully, and what they found was terrifying. The pattern of the waves matched exactly with the symbols carved inside the Martian ruins. It wasn't random. It was the same phrase repeating again and again. They are coming. No one could tell when or from where, but the message was clear. Something had been set in motion and it couldn't be stopped. The council made the decision to expand Project Aegis. They began constructing larger stations beyond Earth's orbit, closer to the Moon and Mars. Humanity was no longer waiting passively. They were preparing. People adapted to the new world quickly. They learned to live under the idea that they might not be alone, and that someday they might have to defend their home. Children studied both science and space defense in schools. Artists painted the stars not as distant dreams, but as silent witnesses to a coming story. And amid the growing strength of humanity, there was also hope. Hope that maybe, when the moment came, peace would still be possible. As night fell across the Earth, millions looked up at the sky once again. The stars shone brighter than ever, but now they felt different. Not just points of light, but possible paths, possible eyes, possible homes. Somewhere beyond them, something was watching. Maybe with curiosity, maybe with fear, but one thing was certain. Humanity had changed forever. The world that once fought over borders was now ready to protect one home, Earth. The age of separation was over. The age of unity had begun, and though no one could see it yet, far beyond the reach of any telescope, a faint blue glow moved slowly across the darkness of space. Not toward Earth this time, but circling it, as if observing quietly, waiting for the right moment. The war hadn't begun, but the countdown had. The lights that vanished from the edge of the solar system were gone for months. The world slowly began to return to normal, though deep down everyone knew it was only a calm before something greater. People tried to live their lives. Children went back to school. Cities glowed at night again, and laughter returned to the streets. But no one could look at the night sky without wondering what might be waiting out there. Project Aegis continued growing faster than ever. The great shield of satellites around Earth now reached far beyond the Moon. Dozens of space stations orbited silently above the planet, connected by thin paths of light. From the ground, they looked like moving stars, a symbol of hope that humanity had built with its own hands. Inside the United Earth Council, things were different. Meetings ran day and night. Scientists, engineers, and world leaders worked tirelessly. They knew that the warning written on the Martian ruins on "They are coming" was not a myth. It was a countdown. They didn't know when or how, but they knew the moment was getting closer. On a quiet morning, one of the outer satellites detected a strange signal again. It was faint, rhythmic, and almost identical to the one recorded before the lights disappeared. This time it was stronger, as much stronger. The computers that monitored deep space began picking up unusual readings. Something was approaching, fast, from beyond Neptune. The first to notice were the astronomers stationed on the lunar base. Through their high-range telescopes, they saw a cluster of tiny blue dots moving together, glowing faintly like a swarm of fireflies in the dark. They weren't random. They were moving with purpose, straight toward the inner planets. The news spread across the Earth in hours. Once again, the world stopped. Factories paused, classrooms went silent, and people turned their eyes to the screens showing the strange lights getting closer every hour. The council declared an international alert. Every observatory, every station, every ship turned its sensors toward the approaching lights. For weeks, people watched as they grew brighter and clearer. Then, for the first time, high-resolution images arrived. What they saw was beyond belief. The lights were not ships in the way humans understood them. They were immense structures that looked alive, twisting, moving, breathing in the darkness. Some were long and sleek, others shaped like rings, pulsing with blue light. They didn't look mechanical at all, but more like living organisms made of metal and energy. No one spoke for several seconds when the images were shown. It was clear to everyone that these beings were far beyond human understanding. They had crossed a distance that human ships couldn't even imagine, and now they were here. At first, there was hope that they might come in peace. Messages were sent in every possible form. Radio, light signals, mathematical codes. Every known way of communication was tried, but no response came. The objects kept moving forward, slow and steady. The world's mood shifted again. Fear returned. People began preparing in their own ways. Some prayed, some packed supplies, and some simply sat outside at night, watching the stars and whispering to themselves that maybe everything would be okay. Then came the first real sign. One of the Martian outposts reported that their sensors had detected unknown energy passing near the planet. The energy didn't attack or destroy anything. It simply scanned like a wave of light sweeping through. Every device shut down for a moment, then came back on. It was as if something or someone was observing humanity closely. On Earth, the Council held an emergency meeting that lasted for hours. The question everyone feared was finally asked. What if they are not here to talk? What if they are here to claim what once belonged to them? There was silence. Then the head scientist spoke softly. If that's true, we can't run. We must stand. And that was the moment humanity decided. The great plan that had once been called Project Aegis changed forever. It was no longer just a shield, as it became a declaration. The networks of satellites were reprogrammed. The stations armed with defensive energy beams that could protect Earth's orbit. And small ships were deployed beyond the moon, forming a living line between Earth and the unknown. It was not a message of aggression. It was a message of survival. When the news was broadcast to the public, something remarkable happened. Instead of panic, people felt pride. The world didn't tremble in fear this time. Instead, it united once more. Factories worked day and night, not for profit but for the future. Young people volunteered to train as communication officers, engineers, and scientists. Humanity had never been so focused, so determined, so alive. Across the oceans, people painted symbols of unity on their buildings and homes. Streets were filled with posters that read, "One planet, one people, one future." The alien fleet kept coming closer. It was now within the orbit of Jupiter. Cameras captured breathtaking images of their ships glowing like enormous suns, reflecting off the gas giant's swirling clouds. It was both terrifying and beautiful. At this point, something unexpected happened. One of the alien ships broke away from the main group and moved toward the moon. It didn't approach Earth directly. Instead, it stopped and remained there, silent. The lunar base tried to send messages again. Still no response. But something about the way the ship stayed in one place felt different, almost as if it was watching, waiting, maybe even listening. Days passed. The ship remained motionless. And then one night it sent a signal, not to Earth but into deep space. The message was strange. A repeating wave, rhythmic and pulsing, that scientists struggled to decode. It wasn't in any known language or math pattern. But when the data was played through sound software, something shocking happened. The signal created tones that sounded almost like a human heartbeat. The scientists stared at each other. What did it mean? Was it a warning, a message, or a mimicry? Something trying to show understanding? No one knew for sure. Back on Earth, debates grew intense. Some believed the aliens were trying to communicate in a form humans didn't yet understand. Others thought it was a test, a way to measure Earth's reaction. But what came next removed all doubt that humanity was being watched. Dozens of satellites detected the same energy surge that had been felt near Mars, but this time, it surrounded Earth completely. For several seconds, all signals went dark. Every power system, every network, everything stopped. Cities that had never known silence before became quiet under the starlight. And then, just as quickly, everything came back online. But every computer screen displayed a single image for a fraction of a second before resetting, a pattern identical to the one carved in the Martian ruins. The same curved lines, the same circular marks, the same warning. They are coming. The message wasn't a threat. It felt more like a reminder, as if someone, somewhere, wanted humanity to remember what was at stake. At that moment, the world realized that this wasn't just an arrival. It was the beginning of something larger. Maybe a test, maybe a judgment, maybe a chance to prove that humans could rise beyond fear. The Council made the final decision that would change history forever. They announced a global broadcast, a message not of surrender but of unity. The transmission began with a simple view of Earth from space, a blue and white planet glowing in the darkness. Then a voice spoke, calm and clear, carried across every frequency humanity could reach. To whoever watches across the stars, this is Earth. We do not seek war. We do not seek conquest. But we will defend our home, our children, and our hope. We are one people now, and we are ready to meet you. The message was repeated again and again, sent in hundreds of languages, transmitted through light, sound, and code. It wasn't angry or fearful. It was human and full of emotion, courage, and the will to survive. And then, somewhere beyond the moon, the alien ship responded, not with words, not with sound, but with light. It released a wave of bright blue energy that spread gently across space, passing over Earth like a soft breeze. Instruments recorded no damage, no aggression. It was as if the ship was answering in its own way, acknowledging the message. For hours, the blue glow surrounded the planet. People stepped outside and looked up at the night sky, watching it shimmer. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Some wept, others smiled, and many simply stood in silence. No one knew what it meant, peace, warning, or something else entirely. But for the first time in a long time, humanity didn't feel small. They felt seen. As the light faded and the ship drifted away to rejoin the others, the stars seemed to sparkle brighter. Earth remained quiet, but beneath that calm, a new feeling had begun to grow. A strange mixture of fear and pride. The aliens had come, and humanity had not run. They had spoken, and humanity had answered. The watchers across the stars had seen the rise of humankind, not as divided nations, but as one united world ready to face the unknown. And as the fleet moved silently beyond the moon's shadow, one of the council members whispered the words everyone was thinking, but no one dared to say aloud, "This is just the beginning." For several weeks after the blue light faded, Earth remained silent. The alien fleet had stopped moving, hovering in the far side of space like distant shadows. The world didn't know what to expect, another signal, another light, maybe even an arrival. But nothing came. People tried to move on with their daily lives, but the feeling of suspense never left. It was like standing in the quiet after thunder, waiting for the next sound. The skies looked the same, the stars still twinkled, but everyone knew something was different. Humanity had changed forever. The council kept communication open, sending peaceful messages day and night. They wanted to make it clear humanity did not want war. They wanted understanding. But the alien fleet remained silent. Not a single signal came back. Then one night something unusual happened. A small object separated from the alien formation and began moving toward Earth. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a small spacecraft, and it moved slowly, carefully. Every telescope on the planet turned toward it. The world held its breath. The object entered Earth's orbit and stopped near one of the outer defense stations. It didn't attack or emit any dangerous energy. Instead, it released a single pulse of soft golden light, almost like a heartbeat. The machines at the station immediately started recording data. Within seconds, they received a message. It wasn't a voice or a language. It was a series of images and sounds, flashes of light, echoes of distant memories, scenes that made no sense at first. But as scientists decoded the data, a clear picture began to form. The aliens were not invaders. They were refugees. Long before humans ever existed, their world had been part of a vast civilization, a network of peaceful species spread across hundreds of stars. They had lived in harmony for thousands of years until something terrible happened. A force beyond comprehension destroyed their suns one by one. Entire worlds vanished and their people scattered into the darkness, searching for safety. The ones who reached Mars long ago were survivors from that disaster. They had buried their memories there, hoping that one day, if any new intelligent life rose in the solar system, it would find the warning and prepare. That life was humanity. The alien fleet now hovering near Earth was what remained of their kind, tired, wandering, and afraid. They had watched humanity grow, hoping this young race would learn from the mistakes of others. But when humans started building weapons and preparing for war, the aliens hesitated. They didn't know whether Earth would welcome them or destroy them. The message ended with a final image, not of destruction, but of a single shining planet surrounded by light. It was Earth, and beneath it a line of symbols that the scientists translated into one clear sentence: "Help us before it comes again." The council shared the message with the world. Within hours, every screen on Earth was filled with the images, the broken alien worlds, the falling stars, the desperate plea for help. For the first time, humanity realized that the so-called visitors were not enemies watching in dread. They were survivors watching in fear. Something worse was out there. Something powerful enough to destroy entire civilizations. The news spread fast. Some people cried. Others stood in silence. Humanity had been preparing for war, but now it had to prepare for something greater. Understanding. The council gathered once again. The question was not about defense anymore. It was about choice. Would humanity open its arms and help these beings, or would it close itself off and live in fear? The debate was long and emotional. Some feared that helping the aliens would bring danger to Earth. Others believed that turning them away would be a betrayal of what humanity had become. A united, compassionate race. After long silence, the decision was made. Earth would help. For the first time in history, a human ship left orbit not for exploration or defense but for peace. It carried messages of cooperation, food supplies, and scientific tools. As it approached the alien ship that had sent the message, the whole world watched. The moment of contact was simple yet powerful. The two ships met above the dark side of the moon, surrounded by endless stars. A beam of soft blue light connected them, and data began to flow between both sides. No weapons, no fear, just communication. And then something incredible happened. The alien fleet slowly started moving again, not toward Earth, but alongside it. They began constructing enormous structures near the orbit of Mars. Stations made of living metal and glowing energy. Humans worked with them, learning their technology, sharing theirs in return. It was the beginning of a new alliance. For months, humans and aliens worked side by side. The scientists who studied the alien signals discovered something terrifying. The force that destroyed their worlds wasn't gone. It was moving again, spreading across the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. The aliens called it the Dark Silence, a force that fed on light and life, erasing both. They had seen it swallow countless stars, leaving only cold, empty space behind, and now, based on their calculations, it was moving toward Earth's region of the galaxy. The news shook everyone, but instead of falling into panic, humanity responded differently this time. They didn't prepare for war. They prepared for defense and survival together. Factories built new machines powered by both human and alien technology. Space stations expanded. Huge shields capable of reflecting energy waves were developed. The once frightened world now worked with purpose, side by side with their new allies. Children grew up learning alien languages. Farmers shared food that could grow in both Earth and Martian soil. Artists painted stars not as distant dreams but as homes waiting to be saved. Humanity had never been more united. Months turned into years. The alliance grew stronger. Together they built something called the Beacon, a giant station at the edge of the solar system. Its purpose was not to fight, but to send a message strong enough to reach across galaxies, a warning and a promise that light would not fade quietly. When it was finally complete, the beacon shone brighter than any star. People across Earth could see it faintly at night, a reminder that they were not alone anymore. But even in their unity, there was still a question that no one could answer. Would the dark silence ever reach them? One night, as the beacon sent its steady pulse into space, the same golden light appeared once again around the alien fleet. This time it wasn't fear, it was communication. The aliens had received a signal from beyond the edge of the galaxy. It was faint, broken, but clear enough to understand. It wasn't the dark silence. It was another voice. The signal carried 3 simple tones repeated again and again. When translated through the same system used before, it formed a phrase that made everyone pause. We hear you. No one knew who or what had sent it. Maybe another civilization had survived. Maybe there were others like the humans and the refugees ready to stand together. Whatever it was, it meant hope. And for the first time in countless ages, the aliens felt something they hadn't felt since their own stars died. Faith. On Earth, people filled the streets cheering as the message spread. It didn't matter what the future held or how powerful the coming darkness might be. Humanity had reached across the stars and found not enemies but friends. The alien ships began to orbit closer to Earth, their glowing surfaces reflecting the planet's blue oceans and white clouds. Together they looked like guardians, watching, protecting, and learning. The story that began with fear had turned into one of unity. Generations later, people would tell the tale of how humanity once stood on the edge of destruction and chose compassion instead of war. They would remember the moment the stars watched in dread, and then in hope. Because when the aliens came, humanity did not run or hide. They reached out their hands and said, "We are here. We understand." And somewhere, far beyond the galaxies, among the fading light of ancient worlds, something began to change, as if the universe itself was beginning to heal. The stars that once looked down in silence now seemed to shine a little brighter. The watchers across the stars, both human and alien, had finally become one. And in that vast and endless night, a single truth echoed quietly through the cosmos. Humanity had not just survived. It had belonged.